Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now it's been a week or so since I've actually done a video over here, and I apologize that we had half term last week. My partner was off. We also then went away for a bit, and to be honest, YouTube is not always a priority for me. I like to do other things, but I'm back and I want to talk about some fantasy books that I'm excited to read in 2025. Now, fantasy is one of those genres that I always tell people is one of my favorite genres. I think it's fantastic. I love the imagination. I love the grand stories. I love the unique characters and cultures and grand, as I said, imagination that the author has to put into these. They're often some of the most fulfilling reads I read. I would say that without a doubt, they are some of the best books I read each year. And I'm in halfway through series here and there. I've started new series that I'm interested in maybe getting into a bit more of, like some of the other offsets of those books. And there are also books I've not yet started, series I've not yet started that I so desperately want to get into. And so I kind of wanted to go through that with you now, and I want to go through that list. It's a longish list, so prep yourself. I've got some of the books physical that are on my physical TBR, but a lot of the time I'm going to be pointing over here talking about books that I would be buzzing to read in 2025. So as always, stay tuned for this list, but let me know straight away right now if there is a book that you are interested in reading in 2025 that's in the fantasy genre. Fantasy it's got like a thick and a thin line as to what's fantasy, what's sci-fi, what's kind of interpretive kind of fiction, that sort of stuff, alternative history. Where do you kind of draw the line? I'm going to generally go with anything where it's got imagination involved, it's got something mythical involved, it's got something that doesn't exist, whether that's a world, whether that's a specific sort of science, whether that's a specific history or anything like that. But I'm going to go into that with my fantasy. So if any of these you think that's not really fantasy, well, I put it in fantasy. So I don't care for your opinion. The first book is The Shadow Casket by Chris Wooding. Now, this is actually the second book in a series, and it comes after The Ember Blade. Now, if you've never heard me talk about The Ember Blade before, The Ember Blade really impressed me a couple of years when I picked that up. It's down here. It was a book that I'd heard good things about before. It's a book that I genuinely had no idea what it was about. And I kind of read it and I was reading it along and I was like, I'm actually really enjoying this. I'm enjoying the characters. I'm enjoying the journey. The start felt a little bit like it doesn't really know where it's going, but then it kind of picked up a little bit. But by the end of it, I was like, there's some of the character arcs in this were absolutely fantastic. The actual story itself was absolutely fantastic. I was riveted by it, and it ended up being one of the most shocking books I've ever read in terms of a book that I went into with no expectations, and a book that I then came out with like so much hype for. So The Shadow Casket is the second in that series. I was really kindly sent this by Gollancz a while ago now, which is why I have it in hardback, because I don't usually buy stuff in hardback, but I've not yet picked it up and I really do. So it's on my list 2025 to get round to. So let me know if you read this one, if it's something I need to be picking up. The next book I'm interested in reading in 2025, or the next fantasy book, is The Fall of the Giants by Gregory Contaxis. So this is the sequel to his initial debut novel, which was The Return of the Knights by Gregory Contaxis. Now, both of these like stunning front covers, and you'll notice behind here as well there is a little kind of mini novella that I picked up as well by him, or was kindly sent to him by him even, that was okay. It wasn't as good as the debut one though, The Return of the Knights. This was fantastic. It was just quite unique. There was just stuff going on here where you felt like Gregory was like, I'm just going to write what I want to write about. I'm not going to stick to tropes. I'm not going to stick to cliches. I'm not going to stick to any plot kind of movements that usually happen in books. No, I'm going to write what I want, and I really enjoyed it. And it opened up kind of a new interest in me for Gregory. So then when he reached out and he said, can I send you the second book in the book series? I was like 100%. And that's this. The Fall of the Giants. So it continues on, I presume. It says Elliot is now alone, so Elliot's the main character from the first book. He's left Elmore and his friends behind as he heads for the mountains of the Forgotten World on a mission which is almost impossible to accomplish. The Elder Races, the creatures that according to legend are haunted by an ancient curse, are his only hope of defeating Walter. Walter's the very bad guy. It's not a great name for a bad guy, but there we go. Nobody knows if Elliot has the power to break the curse, and Queen Sophie and the people of Elmore depend on him. Walter may have been defeated in the last battle, but he'll soon return more determined than ever to destroy his remaining enemies once and for all. He needs new allies. He wants to get on his side, have suffered at the hands of humans. Will he manage to convince the Elder Races that he is different? The second book in the series, The Dance of Light, will engage you in a compelling journey full of unexpected twists and thrills to the very last page. So that's the second book on my list. I'm really interested to pick it up. I know he's got a third coming out because he dropped me another DM saying I've got a third coming out. Can I send you that as well? So I need to get this one read, so I'm ready for his third one as well. So that's The Fall of the Giants by Gregory Contaxis. My next book I don't actually have the physical copy of yet because the book's not yet technically out, but that is Gatebound by Daniel T. Jackson. Now, I've read the first two books in his series, which is Illborn and Adriel Sin, or Orgiel Sin, I never really knew how to kind of read it. Now, these are really interesting because, as I kind of said with Gregory Tax's books, they don't feel into kind of like a formula. They don't fit into a formula even. They don't kind of stick into some kind of genre overly so. The general idea is there is a group of people who slowly start to realize they have powers. Now, these people have no significance in the world. They're not powerful people. In fact, some of them are often like kind of shunned from society, are slaves, anything like this, but they have these different powers. So the first book focuses on introducing those people and the idea that they have these powers. And then the second book does a really good job of saying, okay, what if all these people who are, I think, essentially meant to save the world, what if all of them aren't all good? What if all of them don't see this power and think, yes, I want to do something good with it? What if some of them have been hurt and damaged and therefore they need to go off and, you know, do some bad things with their powers? I don't know. But they're the first two in the series and Gatebound is the third, and Daniel T. Jackson did reach out to me the other day and asked me if I would like to receive I think I've received a digital version of that one, so I will have to buy the physical version of that one to add to my shelf, but I'm excited to read that because these first two, yeah, just really interesting. I like the idea of them. I like especially the kind of twist in the second book where it's like, okay, you thought it was just introducing these great characters, these heroes, and then, you know what, sometimes they may not all be heroes. So hopefully that doesn't ruin it. There's also loads of wars going on at the same time, which they're trying to kind of dodge and avoid, and there's different factions and things as well, which is really interesting. I liked that. The idea that they're all off in different parts of the world, and I think they're slowly coming together to slowly meet each other and find each other and all sorts. Really cool. There's a lot of kind of like power in this as well. There's an element of the characters do feel powerful, and it's quite cool reading about what they do to people that aren't powerful and are a bit mean. So yeah, love that. Love these two books, and I'm excited for Gatebound later on this year. The next book is Dead House Gates by Steven Erikson, and this is the second book in the Malazan series, and I've read the first book here, which was The Gardens of the Moon. Now, this is one of those series that whenever you talk about the greatest fantasy series of all time, this is up there with your Wheel of Time, your Game of Thrones, your Stormlight Archive, those sort of things. And I read the first book, and I think the first book is unanimously agreed to be a little bit confusing. It generally feels like he's got some ideas and he's throwing them all together, and then at the end tries to tie them all together. Apparently with Dead House Gates, things start to round off. Things start to, you know, kind of make sense a little bit. They start to get into kind of some sort of rhythm, which is what you want from a fantasy series, because the first one, yes, there was some cool elements. There was a lot to kind of take in. A lot of the time I spent my time reading this and then looking over a wiki to kind of understand who this race were, because it's not a friendly introduction. There's not kind of like a, okay, here's this race, here's a little bit about them, here's where they come from, or any characters describe any of that sort of stuff. No, it's just here's this race. So apparently now some of that's established. The second book should be good. That's Dead House Gates by Steven Erikson. Really excited to read that. It's just one of those books where you always hear about this series when you hear about the best series of all time, and I think Dead House Gates is, as I said, where things start to actually properly get good, as it were, and make sense, and that's what you get excited about in a fantasy series. The first book's always a little bit of a struggle. If you're impressed with the first book in a fantasy series, I always recommend picking up the second, because I feel like the second one, you've got the characters established. Let's crack on and go through and get the rest of the series done. I know this is long, so do I ever expect to finish this before the age of like 70? Probably not, but let's start by reading book 2 this year. My next book is The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. Now, this is a book that I've held off for a long time because Patrick Rothfuss is meant to be writing the third book, or is meant to be finishing the third book. I don't know. We don't know about it. I have read the first book, which is The Name of the Wind. The Name of the Wind, I think a lot of people is considered one of the best written fantasy books of all time, and I think it's unanimous that Patrick Rothfuss is a fantastic writer. However, as I said, the third book is questionably not maybe coming out ever, so it's kind of a lot of people are like, well, is there much point me bothering with any of this? I'm going to try it anyway because I'm really excited to kind of carry on the series. Some people have said that The Wise Man's Fear isn't as good as the first book, and I know there are some novellas which I think are set in this world as well, which may be worth reading at some point. Again, I'm basing this on some things I've read and some things I've seen of people talking about them, but I don't know. But either way, I do want to read The Wise Man's Fear, so I'm up to date. So at least if that third book does ever get released, I'm there, I'm ready, and I can just read a quick synopsis summary when it comes round to remind myself and be like, oh yeah, I remember now what happened. But yeah, the general idea for this anyway is I've not described some of the other books, so you know, me poor YouTubing, but general idea with The Name of the Wind was that there was this kid who went to university, and it's about Kvothe, who tells this story at a tavern. I'm telling this in really bad order. Start from the beginning. There's a chap called Kvothe who's in a tavern. He's telling these stories of when he was one of the most powerful wizards of all time. And then you kind of go back and you're reading about his journey through being I think he was like a homeless child through university, realizing his power, going on to do some stuff in some story and some exciting things that I don't want to ruin for you via this video. But either way, it's got some interesting magic systems, which I really like. As I said, the writing was really fantastic and the plot was really interesting. I don't remember the world being that expansive. I know there's kind of cities, there's a university and there's some lore and the history around that and that sort of thing, but I don't remember much else being that interesting. It's been a while since I've read this one, to be fair, so I'm probably going to need a little synopsis summary of this one before I go and read The Wise Man's Fear. But I wanted to make sure I got the similar covers as well, because I know there's quite a few covers going on. I imagine these are the same covers. I don't know, the same author text anyway. I feel like Patrick Rothfuss like, just do another front cover, get some more book sales coming in whilst I'm writing this third one. But I don't know. The Wise Man's Fear, that's the next book on this list. The next fantasy book I want to read in 2025 is Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. Now, I say the next, I don't mean this in any sort of order. I'm just saying the next book on this list. Stormlight Archive has been one of my favourite fantasy series I've ever read. It's the furthest I've ever got into fantasy series. I finished Rhythm of War late end of last year. Absolute epic. All of the books in the series are huge and I have so much respect for them. I would argue this was possibly the weakest, and I've not heard a lot about Wind and Truth, so therefore I don't know how confident I am that is as good as everybody was hoping it was going to be. But it's the final in this kind of initial selection of Stormlight Archive books, which is really interesting to me. I think Sanderson said there's 5 in this one, there's going to be another 5, there's going to be a different era, something like that, I don't know, but essentially it's meant to round it up, and that to me is so exciting. Brandon Sanderson is without doubt one of my favourite authors at the moment, one of my favourite authors of all time. Pretty much every single thing I've read by him has intrigued me. You have this really interesting way of writing books with fantastic characters, interesting plot, little twists and elements of kind of, okay, there's a higher power kind of scary thing going on up here that you don't know about, and that's what then builds you into the kind of rest of the series. And the Stormlight Archive has done that with some incredible power, some incredible world building. I feel like this one was a little bit loose. As I said, some of the characters didn't kind of gel anymore. A lot of the kind of plot and story just felt like it was we were caught up in the middle of things as opposed to having a rounded off book. Who knows, maybe he was trying to build up to the 5th book to then kind of build things off and make sure that the rest of the book is fantastic. So that's the other book I want to read, The Wind and Truth in the Stormlight Archive series, which I think, as I said, is the 5th and the final in this kind of initial group of books. I don't know how to describe it, but this is a huge one. This one for me, I'm so excited to read, but I know it's not on paperback yet, and I don't really want to buy the hardback just to read it. I'm hoping the paperback's out sometime this year. If not, this may be a book I read in 2026. But either way, that's next. If you've ever been on my YouTube channel before, you might have seen the book, The Iron Widow by Joanne Jade Zhao. It featured in my shocking books, some of the best fantasy books I've ever read, the other lists that I've done as well, and The Heavenly Tyrant is the next book in the series. Now, I think this isn't actually getting released in paperback until 2026, so this may be delayed until then. The sequel is out for this, and I loved this so much. If you've not heard me talk about The Iron Widow by Joanne Jade Zhao, this is how I try and describe it. It's about this fantasy world in which men control these mecha bots, these kind of giant robots, to fend off aliens from their planet. The bots are powered by their chi, which is essentially the equivalent of willpower or strength or mental acuity, that sort of thing, and they power the robots, but sometimes to evolve these robots they need more chi, and so they have women co-pilots who sometimes they suck the chi out of to power them, killing them. That's the general theme. Then there is one day a girl whose sister was killed by this method, and therefore she wants to rebel up and, you know, stop men from being the power and give women power. I loved it. It's fantastic. It's a no BS book. It really is. It just kind of flies through the action, killing off characters left and right, throwing you into the politics, being like, yeah, this is kind of happening, that's kind of happening, that doesn't matter, let's get back into the action. And it was so fun and so good. Even the small romance element, which I'm usually a bit nervous about in fantasy, because sometimes, you know, with your Akators and your Iron Flames and all this sort of stuff, they become a little bit smutty, and I'm not interested in that. I want to read about fantasy. I want to read about the cool elements. I don't want to read about other stuff. So, bit worried, don't need to worry. It's just a romance in this book. There's just two people who like each other, realize they like each other and crack on, and that's it. Such a fun book, and I'm so excited for the sequel. I've read the reviews of it. The reviews of it are meant to be brilliant as well. I feel like Joanne Jade Zhao is one of those people who just writes what she wants rather than writing maybe kind of what the fans want. I don't know, or maybe she's writing it as if I was a fan, how would I want it to go? And so I'm excited for the sequel, because this, as I said, was just a blast. It was just such a great time. I don't think I've ever said the word blast in that context before, but I have now. That's Iron Widow and the book I want to read in 2025, though I think it's probably going to be 2026, is Heavenly Tyrant. And then my final book on this list is Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio. Now, I have no idea how to say that last name. Is it Ruocchio? I don't know. Someone could let me know down below. That'd be fantastic. Either way, I've seen this book for so long. I've seen this kind of up in people's lists when they're talking about some of the best new indie-ish kind of books they've read, fancy books they've read. I've also just seen it in a book where people recommended, if you like Destiny as a video game, go read this book because it's meant to be the similar sort of thing, this kind of aliens, big sci-fi expanse sort of thing going on. Now, this may be more into people's kind of sci-fi than it is fantasy, but science fiction is just a subset of fantasy. Fantasy is make-believe and science fiction is just make-believe in the future. So this does count, but I've heard really fantastic things about it. The plot to me always just sounds very underwhelming, like Amazon really need to up their game, or the publishers need to up their game in terms of how they're describing this book, because it doesn't do the book justice, I don't imagine, based on what people have then gone on to say about it. But I've heard really, really good things. There's more subsequent books I've seen as well, which I'm also really excited to get into. That's the final book on this list. So that is the end of this list. So they are just some of the fancy books I want to try and read in 2025. They are the books essentially when I sat down just now to think about what books would I be really excited in the fantasy genre to pick up in 2025. They're the first ones I can think of. There's quite a few more, and I can't guarantee I'll get round to all of these. We already know some of these probably won't be coming out in paperback, and therefore I may not read them. Might I just pick them up on Kindle, an audiobook anyway, and then just, I don't know, Photoshop me holding it in those pictures I do over on Instagram? I don't know. Maybe I'll get that excited for it. Who knows? I'll see if it's available in Libby, and then I may be able to get the audiobook or something like that. Either way, I'm excited to read all of those fancy books at some point, and it's only February, so maybe this year. Let me know what fancy books you're excited to read. Let me know some fancy books you think I should read. Let me know if there's some fancy books you don't see on my bookshelves, you never see me talk about in YouTube videos that you think are huge and I'm missing out on. I've done Wheel of Time. Well, I say I've started Wheel of Time. I've started Game of Thrones as a short. I've done Stormlight Archive. I'm kind of working my way through Malazan. But do let me know if there's any other fancy series you think I should be focusing on as well. However, until the next video, if I don't see you until then, drop a like, drop a comment, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!